Ebony, you are live on Women Investor Wednesday. Welcome to the show.
Yay. Thank you
How
for
are
having
you?
me. I'm so
And
excited.
you're coming live from Orlando, and I'm normally in Fort Lauderdale, but today I'm in New Orleans. So, we're a US wide podcast here.
Nice.
So,
Those are all really nice places.
exactly. So, Women Investor Wednesday, I started because 5 years ago, I learned that of all of the commercial real estate investors in the US, only 3% were women. And I thought, that is terrible. How can we fix that? And I learned that one of the issues is that, sorry, I'm speaking of technical difficulties. One of the issues is women told me they didn't know any other women that did this, that invested. And I said, oh, I can solve for that. I can put on a conference where I have speakers on stage that invest so that women in the audience can meet women who invest. And then for those that can't come to the conference, I can do a podcast where I interview women who are investors. So that's how Women Investor Wednesday came about. And we've done this for a couple of years now. And I've met so many wonderful women investors. So, and I'm so excited today about you because I have never interviewed anyone with what you do. So please tell the audience about you and what you do, because I think it's fascinating. And then I'm going to have a ton of follow-up questions.
Okay. So I'm Ebony Jones. I'm originally from Chicago. However, I've moved around quite a bit. I'm familiar with LA, New York, Chicago, and then now I'm in Orlando and have been for the last 6 or so years. And the entire time I've been in Orlando, I've worked in this business as a builder. So, so I'm a home builder. I started out as
A
a spec.
home builder, a
Yeah.
home builder.
hmm Yeah. And that title is used a lot. For me, I'm a home builder, but I'm also a contractor. So I'm a residential contractor. Um, and with that, I manage the project. I'm responsible for all aspects. Whereas sometimes you may find a home builder that may outsource the contracting work. So may hire a contractor, whereas in this case, I hold both roles. Didn't start out that way when I first started in the business. Obviously, I wasn't licensed, so I had to gain experience. And I did so by starting as an investor or a home builder that was not a licensed contractor. So over time, I built that experience and I became what I am now. But I know we're going to go more heavy into that. So prior to becoming a home builder, I did study finance, studied actuarial science for the most part in undergrad, and ended up using a good deal of my credits because in my last quarter, I transferred or changed my major to finance. So I like to point that out because most of my study is more math based and less finance based because it's a liberal arts finance degree. And then, I kept on that same track and studied financial engineering as well later in my career, which is how I ended up in New York. In New York, I worked at Moody's Analytics, where I held a couple of different positions there. I was a financial risk consultant, where we analyzed credit risk for regional banks, developed financial models for the assessment of their portfolios of various different asset classes. Had a couple of other roles, but when I got tired of the corporate life, actually, maybe they got tired of me first. So I ended up getting laid off from Moody's Analytics and decided at the age I was at the level of experience I had, and the interest or ideas that I created over time, I thought it was time for me to start pursuing some of those interests since I had the time, I had the space. I didn't have any other obligations in the way. So all the excuses I could come up with, they just weren't solid enough for me to say no. So I wanted to pursue flipping homes originally. I watched all the HGTV shows, loved them, thought I could do it. Grew up as a child loving the smell of sawdust. That's my favorite scent. So I knew something was there because that has to be odd. There might be a whole group of people that, meet on a weekly basis talking about sawdust.
Chanel number sawdust, right?
Right. Yeah. I have to do that someday. But when I was in Orlando and speaking to some folks that were local, they started to, express how there was a shortage of inventory and the barrier to entry for new construction was limited. Lots at that time were going for about $15,000 to $17,000. And I figured with new construction, starting from the dirt, I could learn this process pretty quickly versus doing a flip where you have a handful of experience or exposure to certain aspects of the build, but not the total build. So I found that interesting. I saw longevity in that track over the flip track, and it just seemed less risky. There are unknowns on both sides, but it seemed like there were fewer on the new construction side. So pursued that, and I've been in that space ever since.
So, okay, so I'm going to unpack this a little bit. So finance, math, Moody's, awesome. And then get laid off. And you're like, I've been watching all of these very cool HGTV shows. I'm going to go flip houses. Now, were you in New York and then you moved to Orlando?
Well, when I got laid off from New York, in New York, I had family in LA. I had family in Hawaii even. My sister was in Hawaii. So I decided to go visit and find a way to not ever leave. But she ended up moving. So I moved around a little bit. I even stayed with my sister in South Carolina when she left Hawaii. So for about a year, I moved around. And then eventually I ended up in Orlando.
So you get to Orlando and you're thinking, and you start looking at the MLSs thinking, I'm going to buy a house, fix it up and flip it. Did you have your real estate license at this point?
No. When I started, I had no licenses.
Okay. So you didn't have a license, but I'm going to buy a house, be an investor, fix it up. Now, had you ever had any kind of like growing up, like a hammer, like a tomboy hammer in your hand, or you were just like, I can do it because I saw it on TV? Like, where did the fix part of the flip come in?
I think it was mainly due to me wanting a fast track for a new career. Also, that was my exposure. Before then, I've never met someone that practiced home building primarily full-time from the perspective of an owner that's doing it from the position that I'm in now. So I didn't have that exposure. I do have a good lineage of folks that are in, carpentry or have done home building before. But that was earlier on in my childhood. So as an adult, my primary exposure was more flips. So I hadn't even considered any other option.
So you're like, okay, I'm going to go you were on this path to buy a house, fix it up and flip it. And then you found out, well, there's lots. Maybe I should just buy a lot and build. I can't even imagine. So did you buy a lot and say, I'm just going to figure this out?
Yeah, so I did have family members that were local to Orlando who were in construction. So I didn't start from scratch. So I did leverage that as best I could. And through that relationship, I was connected to subs and the GC that eventually licensed. Mm-hmm.
So you buy a lot. Your family says, we do this. And here's a couple GCs. You find so when you found the GC, did you end up with that GC? Because for me, I've been through multiple project managers. I think they're good. And then, I go through 3 of them. So with that first GC, are you still, now I know you're your own GC, we'll get to that, but did you, from start to finish, he built the house?
Yes. So he was the licensed contractor, but I went into that relationship knowing that I wanted to eventually become licensed as well.
So you
So
were like
I took a
apprentice? You were an apprentice for him?
exactly, exactly.
So
Yeah.
smart. Did he know that's what you were doing?
Yeah.
He knew he was creating a competitor.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know that he accepted that to be a realistic thought because I didn't have any history of like
And
maybe
you're a
he thought it
woman.
was a far
Oh,
reach, and I'm a
and,
woman.
right. Okay.
He
So,
probably didn't believe me. Yeah.
right. Exactly. So you buy the lot. And did you finance the lot? Did you raise family and friends money? Did you just have the money? How did you pay for the lot?
Yeah, so the lot was, I believe, 15,000, and we bought 2 lots at one time, cash, because when I left my corporate job, I had a retirement account and decided to put that to use. So I did use my retirement for the cash requirement of purchasing the lot, and then also the cash requirement for the loan, the construction loan that we use to finance the build.
Okay, you're good. Don't get ahead of me. Okay, so when you said I used my retirement account, was it a self-directed IRA?
Well, when I was in my job, it was not, but I was able to convert it to a self-directed.
Perfect. Yeah, a lot of people do not understand that they can do that with their IRAs and use money to invest. But we talk about that a lot on this podcast. Okay, so great. So you use the IRA, self-directed, got the cash, buy the 2 lots. Now you have the GC. Now, and you're telling him, I'm going to learn from you so I want to talk about, so you just said we got a construction loan. So how much was going to be the cost of the house to build it?
Well, we had estimated about 170 to 180,000.
And you went to a bank and said, I own a lot and I want to build a house and I want a loan. And the bank said,
Sure. Most of the experience requirements fell on the GC. So there wasn't much concern for my lack of experience. There was some benefit to using him beyond just being his apprentice. There was a prior relationship with family. So it's possible that I was able to utilize him in more ways than if he were a stranger to me before that project. So he did have to sign certain documents related to the loan, but he wasn't at risk. He wasn't responsible for the financial portion. But beyond him being licensed, he was liable for obviously the quality of the construction, and then he had to sign off on his experience and a few other things.
So was it one house per lot or one house on the 2 lots?
No, one house per lot.
So did you just do one house at a time?
Yeah, I did one house. Okay. And then prior to completion, we did start the second house. So
when did you start to, how long does it take to get your GC license, and what does that entail? Is it an in-class thing? Is it online? How many hours? All of that? How long?
So it depends on the person and it depends on your background. So in Florida, every state is different. So in Florida, there's a 3 exam series that test just about everything, and they range from maybe a 2-hour exam to a 6-hour exam. And so that's really where the time comes in, is just how much time does it take you to get through that? Because technically you could take one day after day after day. So if you're familiar with some of, the industry terminology, that'll carry you pretty far in the exam. So that part depends on the person. The other requirements of becoming licensed would be experience. And the amount of experience varies based on what your college background is. If you have a degree, then you get a waiver of, I believe, 2 years or so. So out of 4 years that are required, I believe you only need 2 years of experience. Or if you have a degree in construction management or something in a related field, then I believe you only need 1 year, or it might even be waived, the experience requirement. But the type of experience also matters. So that's why that relationship and that apprenticeship was very critical for me as I was building, because one, not having any experience, who's going to hire me for me to even get the experience? So the added advantage to being an investor is that I could pay for my own experience. So that worked out, and I didn't necessarily plan it that way, but it worked out.
So I presume you had to sign personally on the construction loan.
Yes.
And what was the term of the construction loan? Like, how long was it a 1 year deal? And then what was the interest rate? Do you remember?
Well, I take that. So it was a non-recourse loan.
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or at least the first one. I don't know what I did later in life, but they became recourse all of a sudden. So non-recourse, it was a more conservative lender that I ran into, and their interest rates were a little bit more favorable, but they required more of a down payment. So I want to say
yeah. What was the LTV like? Did they give you a 65% loan or a 75% loan?
Yeah, I think it was either 60 to 65% at most
of the costs
of the total cost. Now they do restrict certain costs. So certain soft costs, they don't finance.
Right,
so,
right. Mm-hmm. And was it a 1 year loan or a 2 year loan? How long did they give you to build the house?
8 months with a 4-month extension.
Great. Okay, so now you buy the lots, you get the GC, you get the construction loan, and we break ground. And you're out there, like, they're pouring concrete, and you're out there with your your hard hat, right? And your boots.
Yeah. Yes.
So day one, again, the GC's looking at you like, oh, I guess she's serious. She's going to show up. Like, how is your relationship with the GC in the beginning? Because I'm sure by the time you kept showing up every day, he's like, oh, like, it just probably became, it was probably fine. But in the beginning, I'm guessing he was questioning whether you were really going to do this.
Well, so I think that he was able to build confidence in me over the earlier stage of the process, because you don't buy the lot and then jump right into construction. You spend many months preparing for construction, and that administrative task no one likes. So the the contractor was happy to give that responsibility to me. And
so
it was hard.
Like, did you have to hire an architect to design the house?
Yeah, so I took that on myself.
And then permitting?
Yeah, so I did the permitting steps, I did the architect. What was great about the plans is that the architect that I ended up hiring, he provides plans for a lot of spec builders. So not only did I get the plans that have already been utilized before, but I was able to go to a home that's been built off of those plans. Awesome. So, it could be hard having a vision for what something on paper will look like. But I felt confident about what we were building. I was planning to design it a little bit different. But that part was really easy.
So how long did it take you to build the house? Did you do it in 8 months, or did you need the 4-month extension?
No, we needed the 4-month extension.
Did you go beyond that, or were you able to do it under the 12?
Well, we were able to build it within the 12, but in order to pay it off, we had to also sell it within the 12. And I believe we did end up needing a 13th month for that reason.
So was that the plan all along, to flip it as soon as it was done, or were you ever considering renting it?
No, I was planning to flip it, just to ramp up the because we had a limited amount of capital, and I wasn't aware of any resources that we could utilize for a build beyond the cash we had and the type of loan structure we used at that time. So it didn't seem like that was going to get us very far. So if we build and sell, we build our capital, and there was a need for a lot more homes. So we didn't see that being a problem to build and sell. We just had it probably wasn't a unique challenge with our buyer, but our original buyer ended up falling out of the contract. Like they didn't satisfy their requirements of the contract. And the challenge with new construction is if you pre-sell it or if you go into contract before it's complete, they can sit on this contract for many months. And then the challenges of them as a buyer don't really reveal themselves until the end. So your home is complete, you're ready to close, but then you find out they're not.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. So the first buyer, what was the price of the first buyer's price to buy the home?
It was $235.
Excellent. So you made some
for
profit.
a 4-bed,
Then
3-bed.
he fell out, or they fell out, and then you got a second buyer. How fast did you get the second buyer?
We got the second buyer maybe 2 weeks later.
And you closed with them?
Yes.
Did you sell it for the number you thought you were going to sell it for, or lower or higher?
We sold it. I don't remember what our target was originally, but I know whatever we listed it at is what we sold it at.
That's great.
The full list price.
So if it cost you 180 and 15,000 for the lot, 195. So you made about, after costs, 30 grand.
No. So that's what we planned.
Okay.
It did not work out that way.
Okay. What happened?
We got screwed in a couple of subcontractor contracts, paying someone a deposit, them walking off the site, you having to start that over. It's a small budget, so there's not much room to work with anyhow. So 1 or 2 people that screw you, that could kill the entire deal. With new construction, you get bids on supplies and labor, but because it's such a lengthy process, by the time you're ready to execute on those contracts, the numbers are, no longer what they were. So sometimes it's more favorable, but rarely. So, there's that risk, which makes for the lower price point homes even riskier because there's so little room in case of those issues coming up. So we ended up making $8,000 off of that.
Oh, I was going to say, at least I was going to say, I hope you broke even. Okay. So you made 8,000. Okay. So when it was all said and done, right, you cashed your check, did you go immediately into house number 2 on lot number 2? Were you thinking, should I be doing this? What was your thinking? And then you're in the middle of getting your GC license, right? So you're having this, this is what I'm going to do for my career path. Were you, and again, I'm putting all these words in your mouth, but were you thinking, I'm going to do better next time because I'm going to pick the subs better, or the GC will pick the subs better? What was the thought process at the time of finishing one? And you have this, I know you said you started the second house while you were finishing the first, though, right?
Right. So we did end up finishing or coming close to finishing that second house by the time the first closed because we had that delay. So the first house, I became licensed as an agent and I went in a contract with that buyer. That was another possible savings in the budget, was me being our own representation. So when our buyer fell through, I didn't have a database, I didn't have relationships. So I ended up deciding to hire a broker, which was a great idea because they sold it in the first open house. But not only did they sell it in their first open house, they sold the second one in that same open house because
Wow.
the two builds were on the same block, and it was the same model.
Did they sell it to the same party or two different buyers?
Two different buyers.
Awesome. Yeah. Like people say to me all the time, oh, are you a realtor? I go, no, I'm in commercial real estate. I own shopping centers. I said, if I had to sell my house, I'd hire a realtor. I don't do that. That's not what I do. I wouldn't even know. So
Yeah.
I think, and you're right. They're the ones that have the databases, right? So did you make money on the second one?
We did. I think we ended up at 15,000 on that one. Yeah, so
Double?
we're getting closer. Yeah, getting closer.
Have you done more since those two?
Yeah, so that we worked from the same set of plans, and then for the third build, we introduced a new model, which was more on trend with design. So we designed a farmhouse model. And that was kind of earlier on in that new trend, which ended up being a really big hit for that market we built it in. And we learned a lot from the first build. So we took our price point up. We saved a lot in the beginning. We paid a little bit more for the lot because the market was shifting, in a more positive direction. So we paid more for the lot, but we ended up increasing our sales price. So there's somewhat of a balance there. It did also take us some time to sell. I feel like that was the start of COVID. And so we finished the build, but we were restricted from, having open houses earlier on. So we ended up sitting on that longer than we needed. So not only sometimes you may need to pay for that extension, but there's also holding costs as well. So month after month, it's the extension, it's the interest, it's all the other expenses that come with just sitting on a vacant property. And then something else, but that one I ended up going back to having to represent us in that sale. And I did end up securing the buyer without an agent. So that was a huge savings, not having to pay either side. Yeah.
Right. So have you done more than the 3 now?
Yeah. So after that, got really creative. I wanted to build bigger and better and, see how far I could go with the plans. I wanted to take a big risk. I got creative in the financing. So the same 15,000 that I used to buy a lot, I was able to use to buy. So I used 15,000 to buy a $15,000 lot. In this case, I've used 15,000 to buy $100,000 lot.
How'd you do that?
Yeah.
You just got a land loan
From the seller.
Oh, good. Seller financing.
Yes, seller financing. Yeah.
Love that.
What was the other great benefit to that, which I did not realize was also baked in there? I don't know that it's available to this day, but when I did the seller financing, I went to secure the loan and they gave me credit for the 100. So I ended up getting money back on the construction loan.
Amazing.
So I had no money in the deal.
Oh,
And I did that through partnership. Mm-hmm.
Wow. How exciting. So this is your career and this is your company, right? How many houses do you want to do? So right before we got on, I said, how you doing? And you said, oh, it's ramping up faster than I wanted to, right? And I shared with you, I try to keep this between 30 and 45 minutes. So for those of the audience that are joining us live, that they can go, have dinner or, enjoy their evening with their families. But it's been so fascinating. The time has flown by. What is 2024 looking like for you?
So earlier years, I realized I hadn't set the bar high enough. And I spent most of those years focused on the day to day because I was learning as I was going. So it may have been important that I did that. But this year, I'm stepping away from more of the day to day work and spending more time on growth strategies. So, what we're doing in 2024 is putting together a fund where investors can now participate in our deals. And we build a community that understands what we're doing, you know, who we're able to reach and how they can be a part of that. So wanting to support our growth, but doing it in a way where we're not, not that stress is bad, but wanting to make sure we tap into all available resources in the way that the big players do things. And through syndication or funds, that's how big projects happen. So we're going to test the waters with that this year and hopefully still focus on infill builds, but do more spec projects. Whereas now we're kind of focused on client-based semi-custom builds.
Amazing. Amazing. Women in power, not many women GCs.
Yeah. And, that is, I made a note that you said earlier that, a lot of women just weren't aware that there are other women out here, doing similar work. Because earlier in my career, I did not want to show my face. I didn't want to reveal that I was the one behind it because I'm a woman, but I'm also a Black woman in the South in construction. So I didn't want to put too much on people at one time. And that's a lot to digest. And so a lot of times when people come to the site, when it comes to inspectors or anyone visiting, they never knew that I was the contractor. Sometimes I even shared that I was, but at the end of it, it still hadn't registered that I was the actual contractor. So, now I accept that. I understand it. I see where we're at in society and how that could be a challenge. But now I'm out. I'm not shielding myself from any of that. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I was going to say, I hope you're not doing that anymore.
Yeah. And now that I am, it's like there are so many others. And while I was hiding, I didn't see anybody else doing what I was doing. But now that I'm out and proud, I'm running into a lot of women contractors doing lots of really impactful things. And I get to learn from them now that I'm out in the market and trying to, expose myself, starting networking. I did not network before.
Is there a women GC group? I've got to believe that there's a women GC group.
Yeah, I'm part of NABWIC, which is the National Association of Black Women in Construction.
So NABWIC. Excellent. How many people are part of that?
I want to say there are 300 or so active members. I could be very wrong. Yeah.
Well,
but it is nationwide. Yeah.
I'm so excited to have met you. I love what you're doing. Will you please come next year to my conference and speak on stage?
Well, Beth, this is my first podcast, right?
And yeah, but a year from now, you'll be ready to go on stage. And
you think so? Okay.
And we're going to talk about syndications and funds because you're going to have done that, right? We need women that look like me and look like you to be doing more of this.
Yes.
So I would love to have you next year in South Florida at our conference on stage with Roxy, who wants to make an appearance. She's a woman. She can come. Right. Hi,
Roxy. My baby.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I would love that, Beth.
Okay. So So mark your calendar. But yeah, our conference is March 14th and 15th, coming up very quickly. We have 13 speakers. We have the speakers. We have breakout rooms where women go deep. They do deep dives, the speakers, on how they found the deal, how they financed the deal. We have speed networking where we introduce GPs and LPs. So next year, if you have a fund or you have a syndication, you can talk to the women in the room that are looking to invest. It's a phenomenal conference. So it's usually in March. So I'm going to reach out to you and we're going to put it on your calendar for next year to be a speaker. But we have 9 tickets left for this event in 2 weeks. Only 9. I know we're going to sell out. So if you're not doing anything on March 14th and 15th this year, you should come down. So then you can see what it will be like when you're on stage next year.
Okay. And it's where? Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah, it's in Dania Beach, a mile from the airport. You could take the Bright Line.
Oh, nice.
But so if you had one piece of advice for someone that's listening and is thinking, I could do this. I could, let's say they don't want to be a GC. Let's say they just want to buy a lot, hire you to build it, or do you build for other people?
Yes.
So let's say there's a woman listening and watching who loves Roxy and wants to build homes and wants to buy a lot and hire you. What would be your advice to that person who's watching HGTV and thinking, should I fix and flip? Should I build a house? What's your advice to that person that has this idea in their head?
Well, I can't speak to the fix and flip side of the industry, so I am a bit biased, but I obviously just do it, right? Whatever the barriers appear to be, you can break them, so I would not allow for that to interfere whatsoever. Part of what I want to do is introduce being a general contractor to as many people that will listen or have interest. I've motivated many women already to do just that, become licensed. I've met a woman before who said, she became a realtor to support her father, who was a builder. And then she met me and I asked, had you ever considered being a builder? And she said, I never did until I met you. And she had been supporting her father for 20 years and it never dawned on her that that was also an option for her. So I want to introduce becoming licensed because that's also very important. Take ownership, take control over the project, take advantage of those that are willing to teach because they're out there. That's how I got into this industry. So how dare I not offer that same, option to anyone else who wants to do the same? So I would say break the barriers. Don't even, be aware of them, and then be better because of it. But it should never stop you. There will always be barriers, but somebody broke them at some point. And what makes you think you can't, So I think that the women that have come before me have done a ton of work on my behalf, and I want to do the same. I met the first Black woman contractor in the state of Florida, and she brought me to tears. I didn't even know, I don't know what her path was like, but I know it was rough, because it's been somewhat challenging for me. But to have started that many years ago and be the first at it, and she's still in the industry today.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm encouraged.
Amazing. Ebony, you are so inspiring. I am so happy you were our guest in this week's show. Thank you so much for your time. You were awesome. No one knows watching unless you would have just because you said it that this is your first podcast. You were awesome. All right.
Thank you.
So thank you for being our guest. And for those of you watching, you're going to see Ebony on stage at next year's conference. All right. Thank you, everyone. Good night. And we'll see you next week. And then the week after that's the conference. So those of you that are coming, I can't wait to see you. Thank you, Ebony. Good night. And I have a nice evening. And thank you so much.
Thanks, ladies.